Hello, 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 and welcome to the second episode of Mixed Media Reviews. My name is Kelsey, and today I'll be talking about a TV show. This week's TV show is the Netflix original Julie and the Phantoms. Prior to watching Julie and the Phantoms, I had not really seen anything about it. I didn't see a trailer or anything like that. The show was released back in September of 2020, but it was featured on Netflix's homepage for a little bit, and I think it was the same day, but it could have been a day or two later, but fairly soon after it was released, I decided to go ahead and watch it. The promo image looked really cute, and I am not one to shy away from teen shows, so I thought it was just right up my alley. And before I get to the summary, I just wanted to say that I'm going to try to refrain from any of the major spoilers. The summary and, my likes and the critiques are going to contain some light spoilers, but most, if not all, of the information I share today will be from that first episode, maybe the second episode. But I'm going to try to kind of generalize it as much as possible, so that I don't give any big details away. A quick summary of Julie and the Phantoms was tricky. I tried to keep it fairly simple, so again, that I wasn't giving too much away. So this is a very overly general summary of what Julie and the Phantoms is about. So this show is about a young girl named Julie who loses her love of music when she loses her mom. When cleaning out her mom's studio, 3 ghost dudes magically appear in front of her. The 3 boys, Luke, Alex, and Reggie, struggle with their newfound ghosthood, but with their shared love of music, the boys and Julie start a band together. So cute. The show isn't really a musical in the traditional sense. There's only a couple scenes that I can really think of that may be more like a musical, but the rest of the show is more about the music the band makes together. So we get a couple songs in each episode that relates to what's going on, but the music typically makes sense in the scene, in that it's not just people singing at each other like a musical would be, but they're performing for, one reason or another. What I liked about this show, more like what didn't I like, because it's very few things. I kept track of everything I watched in 2020, and a month or two into 2021, maybe until March, but I watched 69 shows, or 1,408 episodes, 61 movies, and 9 comedy specials. So I watched about 1,478 things, which is like a lot of minutes. And out of all the things that I watched, which were technically 139 different things, only 16 of those received like a 10 out of 10 rating from me. And some of those were my favorite rewatches, like Hot Rod and Parks and Recreation. So those, of course, were going to get a 10 because I love to rewatch them over and over again. But there were a few of those items that got a 10 that were new. Julie and the Phantoms was something I immediately fell in love with and immediately rewatched like 10 times. So it is definitely one of my favorite shows that 2020 released. I would say it's in my top 3, if not the number 1 spot of shows that was released that I loved. And so just a fair warning that this list is more going to be a list of things that I loved and not the things that I liked. And it's also going to be fairly long. So first and foremost, I loved that this was a good family show. From the problems to the solutions to the way that they deal with the grief to the comedic moments, to just everything that they did in the show. It was just all so wholesome and in a way that you don't really see in a lot of shows that tend to be marketed towards teens. I'm looking at you, CW. Now, maybe it's because this is more of a family show and less of a teen show, and you could maybe compare it to Disney or Nickelodeon. But the acting was so much better than those shows, and it felt so much more real than the kind of soundstage feel that you get from Disney and Nickelodeon and other like kid type shows, where it's never taken too seriously. You feel like they're always kind of holding back in a way. And I'm not trying to say that those CW type shows or the Disney Nickelodeon shows are inherently bad, or that necessarily that this type of show is inherently good. But it was just refreshing to see them find that balance of being able to be serious and sit in the moment and accept it, instead of just jumping away rather quickly. It was nice to see a show that's marketed towards younger viewers act like their younger viewers are very much capable of feeling these feelings, and that they don't have to shy away from taking things a little deeper and not just focusing on, the surface feelings, not just kind of mentioning things, but not really holding them in that moment. And I think that's what Julie and the Phantoms did really well. They had good, solid acting mixed with moments that you could see happening in shows that, that allow you to feel those emotions, instead of kids shows where a lot of them tend to try not to focus too much. And it always makes me feel like they don't think that kids can handle big feelings. And while I am certainly not a teenager any longer, I have never been able to. And I have never, even back then, when I was a teenager, been able to really relate to many of those teen shows. And maybe I'm in the minority here, but my teen years were not at all like Riverdale or Pretty Little Liars. And that's even after you take out all the murder. I think I could see myself in the world of Julie and the Phantoms. Even though I hadn't had those experiences, I could see myself in those experiences, and it didn't feel like it would be a giant leap to be in them. Except for maybe the ghost part. Those other teen shows also always seem to have actors that are in their 20s playing teens, and sometimes they're even in their 30s. However old they actually are, they never really look like teenagers. And I understand to some degree, since, minors have different hours and rules for working, and sometimes they want to make sure that their actors don't age too quickly. But what I really loved about Julie and the Phantoms was that they were all played by actual teenagers for the most part. They may have been a little bit older, but for the most part they were much closer, and they actually looked like they could be teenagers in high school. The Ghosts guys were actually in their early 20s, but I think they still were able to get them to look like they could be 17 or 18, and it made sense that they needed older actors so that they didn't age, because, they're ghosts. I had mentioned first and foremost, one of the things I loved about this show was the way that they dealt with the problems and the solutions. I liked that it wasn't overly dramatic. The drama felt natural and not contrived. And most of the issues that they have, like a miscommunication between friends, is solved fairly quickly. Of course, not all the problems are solved right away, but it was nice to see a good balance of solvable problems that can be fixed with communication versus problems that may need to be worked on a little bit longer. And it was just very refreshing to see characters resolve their problems in such a positive way. Let's talk about how incredibly amazing this soundtrack is. I listen to this soundtrack every day for literal months. I will still listen to songs from it now, and it's been like 8 months, so it's pretty good. I really enjoyed all of the songs from this show. Even Julie's rival, Carrie, who is in this little like girl band that just screams K-pop, and I love it. You want to hate her, but her songs are just so catchy. All of the songs are just so catchy. They get stuck in your head for sure. Which brings me to the fact that every single person you see singing or every person you see playing their instrument, they're actually singing and playing those instruments. And before they even recorded the very first scene, the band that makes up Julie and the Phantoms all played together in a boot camp style work thing. They did it so that they'd feel like an actual band, and they were even supposed to go on tour like an actual band. Madison Reyes, who plays Julie, was only 14 when she auditioned. She is all self-taught. She never even took any voice lessons, and her voice is just so phenomenal. The entire cast is just incredibly talented. For a show dealing with a lot of death, it is surprisingly very positive. The songs throughout the show are all about picking yourself back up again. They're about living again. And of course, every song seems to have a double meaning. For Julie, a lot of these songs tend to be about finding herself after losing her mom. They're about living a life again after a year of withdrawing from the world, and about finding some light in such darkness. For the guys, these songs are about getting a second chance at their dreams. They're about finding life again through Julie and through the music that they create with each other. In the very first episode, we hear the guys talk about feeling alive again, because the only time they ever really felt alive was when they were playing music. And being able to play music again just kind of sparks that life in them. And then we see in the beginning of the second episode, Julie saying to her best friend Flynn that she feels alive again after playing music for the first time. This spark of life is a recurring theme in both the episodes and the music. I really loved all of the relationships in this show. We see a lot of supportive friendship and supportive parenting. So I already mentioned her best friend Flynn, but their relationship is just so incredibly adorable, and I love how supportive they are of each other. Flynn is like Julie's cheerleader. She's constantly supporting her, telling her how amazing she is, and just kind of pushing her to go outside of her comfort zone because she knows Julie's just gonna kill it. Julie's father is also an incredibly supportive character. You can tell he's trying really hard to figure out exactly how he's going to be a single parent to not just Julie, but Julie's brother as well. But the only area he never falters in is in his support for his children. And it's really nice to see a parent so involved in their children's lives and one who wants the best for them while also allowing them to take the lead. Julie's father doesn't try to tell her children how to grieve. He doesn't try to tell them how to move on. He just tries to have them tell him what they want, what they feel, and he's just kind of there to support them in doing that. And he's also very supportive of Julie and her music, encouraging her to kind of chase her dreams. There's so much more things that I loved about this show, but I know I need to start wrapping up because otherwise I will just be talking for hours. So I'm just going to briefly mention a few other things that I really liked that I'd love to go into more detail about, but we'll just kind of leave it here. I really loved the diversity of the cast. I really love the normalization of Alex and Willie's very flirtatious relationship and the support that Alex has from his two best friends, Reggie and Luke. I absolutely loved Caleb, who's the big bad of the show, and his everything. I loved his clothes, I loved his musical numbers, I loved his voice. He's played by Cheyenne Jackson, and he has an incredible range, and it was just mind-blowing to listen to him sing. I loved Carrie, who's Julie's little rival, like I mentioned. I loved Nick, who is the love interest at first. I loved Nick, who is the love interest, and I just thought he was such a nice character, and I don't want to give too much away, so I don't want to talk about the things that I'd really like to talk about with him. But I thought they did a really good job of portraying how to act in certain situations through Nick's character. So if you've seen the show, maybe you understand what I mean. And I really loved Bobby, who is the surviving member of... And I really loved Bobby, who's the surviving member of their original band, Sunset Curve. And I really... And I can't wait to see what's in store for us next season. It was kind of hard to talk about everything and trying to be spoiler free, so maybe in the future I'll do an episode where I just do all the spoilers and just really dive into some of the specifics of the show. I mean, I could really talk about this show for days. In fact, I've been talking about it for 8 months, and I've been doing it to all my friends and family, and only some of them have actually even watched the show. So overall, I just really loved everything about this show. As I mentioned before, I've seen this show a few times. And I don't think that there was a single thing in it that I didn't like. There are a few things that I wish they would have done more of, so I'm just going to say that those are going to be my critiques. I'm also going to exclude things like more backstory for Alex, Reggie, and Flynn, as I'm hoping that these are things that are shown in the next season. For a show with only 9 episodes, I think they packed in a lot of information and things happening. So I'll let them slide for not having a ton of other backstories for now. One thing I wish that they did more of is that I wish that they would have played up a bit more the differences between when the guys died in 1995 and the present, which is a slightly different 2020 than we experienced. They have a few moments of this where they learn new words like woke and are confused by it. Or they're confused about Julie's cell phone or what trending on YouTube means. But I would have liked seeing them maybe a little bit more flabbergasted by smartphones and texting and being able to Google things like, what is Google? Or even just seeing them catch up with more pop culture references, though we did get some funny moments of them learning about the new Star Wars and Jar Jar Binks. When I first watched and rewatched Julie and the Phantoms, I was trying to watch like every video I could find of reviews and read every critique I could find of it because I just couldn't get enough of the show. And it was only 9 episodes, so I needed more content. Now, there was a lot of praise, which was definitely nice, but I did read one review that was not as praiseworthy, that I mostly disagreed with, but they did bring up a fairly valid criticism, or for me, a partly valid criticism, and that was that we didn't really see Julie and Luke write together as much as we heard that they had written together. For me, I'm a little in agreement, but also a little not. I do think seeing them writing together could have been nice, but we didn't really see much of their collaboration outside of a few relatively short rehearsal scenes. However, I think we got a sense of their collaboration through the music that they performed together, through the lyrics that we heard. We see at one point that Luke had taken a poem from Julie's room and set it to some music he and Reggie are working on. I think you can see that the songs that they say they worked on together have bits and pieces from songs, like the themes of those songs, that they had created separately from each other. Themes from Now or Never that we hear, which was from the old Sunset Curve, the original band, and themes from Wake Up, which Julie had written with her mom. To me, I see how each song can be interpreted to mean something for both Julie and Luke, as well as for Alex and Reggie. And I don't necessarily need to see them physically sitting down to write together. I think the music they make speaks louder than any writing session scene could. And what's the saying? Show, don't tell. I think their music is a great example of showing instead of telling. But all that said, some more rehearsal or writing scenes could never hurt. So, in conclusion, this series is amazing, and I really hope that they end up with a season 2 and 3 and 4, and it just never ends. Julie and the Phantoms is created by Kenny Ortega, and yes, that is the Kenny Ortega who brought us the amazing High School Musical series. So I don't think that they'd bring him on to only do one season of this show. And from what I've heard, Netflix typically announces renewals of family shows much closer to when they premiere. So just because they haven't announced a season 2 doesn't mean there won't be one. So in the meantime, we'll just patiently, or maybe not so patiently, wait for season 2 by rewatching Julie and the Phantoms over and over again. Like I had mentioned before, they were also supposed to tour as a band, but with the pandemic that never happened, so maybe they'll have a tour this summer, or maybe they'll even start filming this summer. Either way, I am very much looking forward to whatever they do and however they continue. And hopefully it won't be too long that we have to wait. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Julie and the Phantoms. I think it would be fun to do a deep dive of this later. So let me know if you think that that's a fun idea, and maybe we can do that as a little different styled episode. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Mixed Media Reviews, and you can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, as long as that is Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, or Radio Public. So please join me next week where I review a movie. Into Moxie, a Netflix film. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye!